Our regular meeting, open up a public hearing for a zoning proposal to create a planned unit development overlay district on approximately 57 acres.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair,
Paul,
if I may.
floor.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Oh, just a moment.
Thank you.
Town Board Liaison, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've noticed there's a number of items on your agenda this evening that involve quasi-judicial proceedings and public hearings. For the record, I want to disclose I am a sitting member of the town board and that I am here in my capacity as a non-voting liaison to the Planning Commission. Although I'm present here this evening and I will be at these public hearings, I will not be giving my opinion or participating in the discussion. I will not let tonight's proceeding influence or affect my review of this matter when or if it comes before the town board. I will make my decision at the town board level based only on the evidence presented during that town board public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, Paul, now you have the floor.
Thank you. This planned unit development, or PUD overlay zone district proposal, is known as Brands East. It would rezone approximately 57 acres. It's been reviewed in accordance with the municipal code regulations on planned unit developments. The intent of the PUD regulations is, among other things, to provide flexibility in land planning and development, resulting in amenable relationships between buildings and ancillary uses, and permitting more intensive use of land where well-related open space and recreational facilities are integrated into the overall design. The proposed PUD is located to the north of Crossroads Boulevard and to the east of Fairgrounds Avenue. It's currently zoned general commercial. The subject application would create the PUD overlay, which would apply to future land use applications within the boundary of the PUD. The PUD proposes variations to allowed uses, changes to site architectural and landscape design standards, as well as changes to the development review process. The PUD plan includes a number of increased pedestrian connections and pedestrian amenities throughout the site. And the, probably difficult to read, but the comparison of permitted uses is included in your packet materials. It is generally consistent with what's allowed in the general commercial zone district. There are a few exceptions I do want to point out. Those exceptions include the, excuse me. So some of those different uses include artisan or craft foundry, manufacturing, warehousing. Those are more as accessory uses and is on a smaller scale than a typical industrial uses. Other things like art galleries with live-work arrangements where people can live in the same building, educational facilities, the manufacture and preparation of food products, manufacture of electronic instruments and services, again, intended more to complement retail. Multifamily dwellings would be allowed with some conditions. The intent of the Brands PUD is to create a mixed-use neighborhood center, and so a key component of that is the residential uses. And however, to ensure that the entire site is not devoted to residential, there are some restrictions on that, including a maximum of 400 dwelling units allowed prior to any commercial development or building permit issuance, with either a minimum of 50,000 square feet or commercial development with sales or forecasted sales in excess of 25 million in gross annual sales. And those were conditions worked out with the developer. The development standards for the site are generally consistent with general commercial. There are a few highlights I want to point out that do vary from general commercial. One of those is the building heights up to 130 feet for office, residential, and hotels, and 55 feet for all other uses, whereas currently the restriction would be 30 feet allowed per the commercial corridor plan. There would be a 0-foot setback allowed for pedestrian-oriented development that is interior to the site. There would be allowances for reduced parking based on shared parking between uses, such as an office and apartment complex with different peak demands. There would be reduced livable open space required for multifamily development. So things such as the recreation amenities, clubhouse would be reduced, and that's kind of in exchange for higher amenities overall within the PUD. A number of changes are also proposed in terms of the processing of future land use applications within the PUD. The changes may be considered under the Municipal Code's PUD standards. One change is the review timeframes. The applicant has indicated that 2-week review timeframe is necessary in order to achieve parity with the Loveland Brands project in attracting development, and staff is committed to meeting those deadlines to achieve that parity. Another change is the administrative approval of all subdivisions. Currently, major subdivisions are 6 or more lots, would require preliminary and final approval by Planning Commission, as well as Town Board approval of the final, and those would all be handled administratively. The final change to point out is the master sign plans would allow for signs in excess of the municipal code. Those would require Planning Commission approval, whereas currently they would require Board of Adjustment approval, and they would have to demonstrate a hardship unique to the property. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, particularly the growth framework. Notification was sent in accordance with the municipal code requirements. Staff recommends the Planning Commission forward to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the PUD, subject to all outstanding Planning Commission and staff comments being addressed. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, supplemental materials, staff memo, supporting documents, all testimony received during the public hearing, as well as the recommendation. That concludes my presentation. I do want to note the applicants are present, should there be any question for them.
Does the applicant have any presentation information that they want to provide?
I think not at this time.
Okay. Since this is the public hearing portion of the process, anybody in the audience have any questions or comments pertaining to this item? If you do, if you could come up to the podium, give us your name and address, and you'll have a 3-minute time limit to give us your information.
I got a comment. My name's Christopher Fair. I live at 7038 Windsor, Aladar Drive in Windsor. I was opposed to the initial developments that were all across there, but it didn't make any difference. I'm opposed to this. It drastically does change the character of that neighborhood, already has. I'm horrified to see what's already happened, and I'm terrified to see what's going to happen. As a result, my wife and I are doing everything we can to steel ourselves to move out of that house. We're sorry to say we're going to leave Windsor. You guys have a nice day.
Anyone else have any comments?
My name is Pat Davey. I live at 8795 Longs Peak Circle. And I guess as Paul's presentation, I don't understand what the development is. You know, there were some things that said what the standard was, and then it asked for, there was some height of 130 feet, but I didn't hear anything about what kind of building or units or anything like that. So I would like to ask somebody to present some information on what this PUD and what kind of buildings are going to be there right now, so we could ask some questions.
Does the,
How can we ask questions if we don't have a presentation, I guess?
does the
I guess what I'm
applicant want
asking.
to address that now or at the end of the public hearing?
I'm happy to come up.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, Martin Lind, 1625 Pelican Lakes Point, Windsor. We've been in front of you several times on this project with first comprehensive plan 4 or 5 years ago. Of course, the rezoning that we did a year ago, and then with the business assistance that we worked out between Loveland, Windsor, and our companies. And this area is going to change a lot. It's Windsor's front door. It was always considered Windsor's back door, Loveland's back door. And with the evolution of the success of the ranch and the Budweiser Event Center and all the things that are going on over there, it's become very evident that this was not a heavy industrial area, that it's a commercial and it's viable. And so we worked with Loveland to create what was called a FZOD zoning that allows for zero lot lines, more urban development, a lot of pedestrian and artifact crossing, higher level of architecture that you would normally see. We have these commitments in the FSOD zoning with Loveland, and what we did was about a year ago, when we finished that, we brought that exact zoning over to Windsor, and we worked with staff to accomplish so that we would have parallel and complementing projects across the street. In the meantime, Windsor, Larimer County, and Loveland all got together and we worked out, along with my companies and about 3 other landowners over there, worked out new standards for fairgrounds, for dealing with a higher level of streetscape than what was ever anticipated when fairgrounds was done. And so, Scott, we've everything from treescape to park benches to wider trails. So, and we've got all of those agreements in place. The inspiration for the brands is we're hoping to pull the inspiration from the Loveland side over to the Windsor side. And again, I don't want to be redundant, but we do want to be consistent with what we're presenting. The Summit is a ragingly successful family entertainment center that we're blessed to have in Windsor, and the new Fuzzies Taco that we just opened, we're very proud to say that's the #1 Fuzzies in the entire nation. And it's, quite frankly, sitting in the middle of a wheat field still. So the market in this area is definitely solidifying what we see as our vision of a mixed-use project where people can live and eat and go recreate all on the same site. Again, the land mass is mixed use in the center, more of a power center over there by the airport, and neighborhood centers on the Windsor side. This is the Windsor site that we are working on tonight. The big box in the middle is hopefully a grocery store.
Mark, can you point out where that is on
Right. There we go, right there. And we're hoping that that's grocery, but we have actually drawn this with mixed use and residential vertically on top of the grocery. And part of that reason for that and the methodology of that is it's going to be a very, very big struggle to compete with Johnstown, Loveland, Timnath, whoever for groceries in this area. So by combining mixed uses, you can offer the property at a much discounted rate or free and still capture some value. Same thing up here. This is the front corner of where the original entryway to the ranch was right here, and that has been traffic studied and relocated, and it's now down here. So to move residential up in this area, the commercial vitality will be more south between Crossroads and this area. Across the street on the Loveland side, same concept, same zoning. And all the way over to the airport, it's all the same zoning. Do remember that all this land was heavy industrial at one point. Where Wagner is and Walmart distribution, that was the original conception for this whole area. Absolutely no pedestrian access, no streetscape, very limited sidewalks. So there's a vision board that would be looking back towards the northeast from I-25. Some of the plaza concepts and vertical elevations. Looking back to the west. Pardon me?
We're asking about the 53 acres or so.
Excuse me.
I'm trying to show you the spirit of the project.
If anybody has any questions, they have to be recognized by the chair, and you'll come up to the podium at that time and give us your question. Until then, Mr. Martin will continue with his presentation there. Go ahead, Martin.
Okay, thank you. For the intent of the brands to be successful is it's following the spirit of what the comprehensive plan was amended to many, many years ago, and there was complete community input in that and dialogue. And this project was anticipated to collect 0 sales tax for the town of Windsor at one point. And if our project is successful, it will be the most prolific sales tax collection in Windsor. This is the actual submittal tonight, staff comments. The site that we're working on is east of where the street dead ends right now at Steeplechase, where the apartments are going in, over to Fairgrounds, north of Crossroads. Traffic plan, signage plans. Again, red lines are staff's comments. The fabric of the intended architectural conclusions is this page of what we're committing to. Again, more elements on signage and architectural. That is the presentation. I've blasted through it, but I'm happy to answer questions after the public hearing.
Okay, we'll capture those questions and then you can address it. Thank you, Martin.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I also just add to what Paul's presentation, just to recap what Paul said to this gentleman's question. The PUD overlay is really, it's an overlay district on the property, so it supplements the zoning on the property, and there aren't actual buildings proposed tonight, so they're standards for the future buildings that will be proposed. So the concepts and things that Mr. Lynn just showed us are representative of what it will look like when it develops to those the standards that are being considered tonight. But tonight there isn't an actual building being proposed. So to your question, this is setting the design standards for the property as different projects are proposed.
See, the part I guess I confused at is there was, and first thing I'd like to say, Scott, is that here we are in the audience and we're trying to read things off of here. I don't think that's good format for a meeting. You have to present things that you can actually see from the audience. You know, I think the staff needs to improve the visual aids that can be used here so that the audience can see it, unless they hand out copies that you can, you know, you guys are looking at a screen that's 2 feet from your head. We're looking at it from 30, 40 feet away.
Sure, we post all of the packet materials on the website the week.
Well, yeah, but I don't have the computer here. I came to the meeting to be informed. But I'm just saying, can you please have your staff use better visual aids that you can't present stuff that you can't see in the crowd. That's what I'm saying. Okay. You know, that's not fair to us sitting in the audience.
All I'm saying is we make the information available the week prior to the meeting. And so it is challenging to make 24 by 36 drawings legible in this setting. So that's why we put it on the website ahead of time.
Maybe we need a bigger screen too, you know?
We'll look into that.
Okay. But what I don't understand is there were some things that's what the standard is for that commercial, but Paul said, okay, in this other column that you could barely see, there was 130-foot height that was requested by the developer. So if there's no buildings already talked about, then how is they know that he's asking for a variance in a way? That's
Mr.
right.
Chair, I don't want to make this a conversation between me and the public, but if I could just answer that question, then,
Okay.
and then turn it back to you
Okay.
to run the public hearing. But this is no different than a rezoning from one zone district to another, which will change the regulation of building heights, setback, and other open space requirements, things like that. So this is simply establishing the standards that future proposals will need to adhere to on this property. But it's the same as any other zoning. If we zone something from single family to multifamily, that's just changing the zoning on the property, just as we are tonight. Then going forward, they'll have to adhere to the standards that have been adopted.
Okay. I would wish to see more of what's going to happen, you know, with this PUD, I guess, and what's proposed. But anyway, I oppose it just because of, you know, there's one big square up there that has apartments, well, or multifamily. I would like the board just to consider what's happening out there. Martin says it's the front door to Windsor. Yeah, that's right. But there's so many apartment buildings going out up there between on Highland Meadows now into Steeplechase that he's extended. Now he wants to add more. But there's also all those down there on Highland Meadows. It's just never ending, the multi-family housing that's going out there. You have to put an end to it sometime. You can't build everybody's request out there. So I oppose that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Amber Oxley. I live at 4609 Pompano Drive, Windsor, Colorado. And I'm not looking to attack this plan. I'm not even against the growth. I'm actually looking forward to a grocery store, so please don't tempt me with that and take it away. And I'd be interested in things like dog parks. And my husband did some research and said that overall growth like that could improve our property house values. So that's wonderful. My concern is that the first time it was rezoned, the plans that we were showed, the buildings were significantly shorter than what it was rezoned to. There was quite a, like my whole neighborhood was here and went on for hours that they were concerned about it. And we were told that, you know, yes, there's extra space in this rezoning, and Martin Lynn said, you know, we're probably not going to use that, we're not planning to. But now we're back here asking to rezone it again, I think, to include even bigger buildings. I do have concerns about the height. I do like the view of the mountains. And I also have concerns about the infrastructure already out there. Like, are the roads wide enough to handle this? One of the things I noticed is on my way home from work, on Crossroads, you go right by Resurrection Christian School, and it narrows to one road, and the Walmart semi-trucks have to get over into the one lane and then get back over into their turn lane, and it bottlenecks there. So increase even more people, and I'm concerned about like things like that. But otherwise, yeah, I'd love a grocery store. So, oh, but and I am like, no offense, I don't really know what you said. I was trying to keep up, and like the big box that says multifamily. What is that? So just, and I understand if that's on the website. I didn't look at the website. I didn't know that that was a thing to do. But
No, that, Mr. Chair, I think maybe Mr. Lind would be able to follow up on that question about the,
what the things actually are.
right, at the end of the public.
Because yeah, if it's the apartments that are already going in the multifamily, no, I really don't want those much taller. But if a little bit further out, you're putting in a little bit taller buildings, okay, that's probably all right, because as you get farther away, you know, like Embassy Suites is pretty tall, but I wouldn't want anything taller than Embassy Suites, especially not right up against my house. So that's where I want more specifics. But, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments, questions? Yes, ma'am, front here.
My name is Annie Bergenheyer. I live at 7406 Turnbull Court. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but this has been heavy on my heart. I just moved here in December, not knowing that Brands East was going in on Highland Meadows Parkway and Crossroads. And Every night, every day, all we hear are the beeping noises from all of the machines. And I realize that that will go away at some point. But it's all night, even midnight. And one of the main reasons we moved to Windsor was, one, because of our kids' school, but two, was the view of the mountains. And so with this increase to 130 feet for the buildings, it is very concerning, because it doesn't just affect us that live here, it affects anybody that drives down Fairgrounds Parkway and wants to see the mountains, or anybody living, you know, on the west side of Windsor. So I'm with Amber. I wouldn't want to see anything taller than Embassy Suites. I'm definitely for growth, because I feel there's so many houses going in Windsor, and I know it was said that things are being planned for the future, but you know, I look at especially trees that are being planted. I don't see that being planned for the future, because when those trees 20, 30, 50 years from now get pretty big, the roundabout on Crossroads is going to be tore out with roots, and the roads, I mean, I don't see the future planning in some of these aspects, and certainly not the roadways. I don't think it will support infrastructure as it is now, especially on, you know, Crossroads and Fairground Parkways. We're seeing an influx in traffic on New Liberty and County Road 13. So I would just ask you guys to consider, you know, having those set parameters that allows for the future, because as it is now, our schools are overloaded. I did hear a mention of a school or education, but our classroom sizes are huge, and we need schools, we need roads. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Vicki Reinke, I'm at 5203 Hialeah Drive. As an educator and going through this whole process with you before, I have to say I find it very irresponsible of Windsor to continue to build more and more and more apartment and high density and push the problem off on another school district. I've been in the education field for many, many years, and I just think that's kind of reprehensible, actually, because that's all you're doing is you're shoving the problem off on Thompson schools. And that's not fair to the neighborhood kids at all, or the families that have moved there for a good education. Also, 300 feet is excessive. When I think of 300 feet, I think of driving through Westminster and seeing this ginormous hotel that just sits out in the middle of nowhere and looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, sorry. It just doesn't fit. And is that really the gateway we want to Windsor, is to have all these apartments and then a high rise, and just, that is not what I consider a welcome to a city. And lastly, Mr. Schick, many of us that are here tonight were in the room last time when you ignored our voices, and you stated that Martin Lind was a friend of yours, and you implied that you would rubber stamp anything he asked for, and that's how we understood it. So with that in mind, I ask that you recuse yourself from this and future votes considering this project. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? Sir.
My name's Doug Brobst. I live at 7035 Aladar Drive in Windsor. You know, I think the best term that applies to what we're looking for you to approve tonight is giving Mr. Lind a blank check. When we talk about going from, is it 55 feet up to 130 feet, the possibility of building buildings that are 130 feet. I read something today that the Embassy Suites is about 8 floors. If I'm not mistaken, 130 feet would be somewhere 12 to 13 floors. Tremendous difference there between what and Embassy Suites is no small, short building. That's quite tall. And then if we're looking at other buildings around there, not knowing what kind of buildings they're going to be at this point of 130 feet, that just doesn't seem like it fits into the area there, and especially the area being so residential as it is. Other speakers previous to me have talked about the infrastructure, County Road 5 there, the Fairgrounds Road, 2-lane highway that's supposed to serve this, and then there are many parts of Crossroad Boulevard that are still 2 lanes. Highland Meadows is going to see additional traffic from this kind of development. It's 2-lane, basically. And when we look at retail and the type of businesses that Mr. Lind is proposing here, this is what I've heard called secondary jobs, not primary jobs, but secondary jobs that are not high paying. They're going to be basically minimum wage. So then people working there, the only thing they can really afford is to live in an apartment. So therefore we have to build more and more apartments. I'm not opposed necessarily to apartments. I realize people need to have a place to live, but I don't think we need to be promoting businesses that are only paying minimum wage. So I really have some reservations, and my main reservations I started out to say is that we're giving Mr. Lind tonight a blank check, basically, without really knowing what he's going to, what type of structures he's going to put in this space. So I would really like for you to think hard about this and not just give Mr. Lind a blank check this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Anyone else have any comments?
Kurt Reinke, 5203 Hialeah Drive, and I feel the same way. If anyone here lives east of this proposed area, it definitely is going to impact everybody's view, everybody's just the feeling of the neighborhood, everything. And I just beg that you not just give another rubber stamp on something just because it's your buddy doing the proposing, and so very opposed to it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Adam Yeager, 5506 Evangeline Drive. Well, first off, I'm opposed to 130 feet. I think that's excessive. Basically everything that everyone else has already said. I know the last year we went through the zoning, we jumped through all sorts of hoops to try and get things, or having meetings continually move back till eventually I couldn't even be at the last town board meeting. But we had, obviously, this whole room, the floor below, I think the floor below that, we had tons and tons of people here fighting the zoning. Outside of the developer, one person spoke in favor of the apartments. And you guys voted to approve them, town board voted to approve them. Basically, what most of us feel from everyone I've spoken with is that the city doesn't really care what its own citizenry thinks, that they really only care about the tax dollars, or they're afraid they're going to be sued by someone who has a lot of money. So I'm not opposed to development. I know some people already said that. I like the idea of having a grocery store. I like the idea of having restaurants. I'm not opposed to development at all. I just think the 130 feet is crazy. I mean, when the apartments went in, we kept being told, or when the zoning was going, well, it's MF2 or MF1, or it's so close, but we're just going to do this, and more allowances were given to the developer, and now it seems like he's asking for even more and more allowances And it seems like the city just basically will do whatever it takes to make him happy, so that we can grow. Most people I talked to moved to Windsor because it wasn't Fort Collins, because it wasn't Aurora, because it wasn't Denver or Austin or anywhere else. It was a small town. It was close to it was close to a bigger city like Fort Collins, but we didn't have to deal with the issues that Fort Collins had. We had more space to raise families and to just enjoy the outdoors. And now it seems that Windsor is trying everything in their whole being to become what we all moved from. So once again, I don't know that this will matter. We all voiced our opinions last year, and it apparently didn't matter, whether to the Planning Commission or to the town board. The citizens' opinions did not appear to matter at all. That's what most people felt. I don't know that it'll matter now, but I still feel it's my obligation to voice my disapproval to something that high. I think 130 is just excessive. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Comments, questions from the board, from the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Foreman.
I guess I just have a question on the building height. It seems to be a common theme among most of the people here. What's the building heights that Loveland's approved for their PUD? I know you guys said that you worked together with them. Don't know if we know what their building height is.
I believe it. They went up to 130 feet, which is why it's proposed here. Mr. Lynn might be able to answer that better than I can.
Yes. Good evening, Dad. You're correct that there is a big concern about height, and let me address that. We did ask that we paralleled these two zonings, these FSODs with Loveland, so that everything was in parallel. The Embassy Suites is the height, basically, of what this is. The Embassy Suites built within 16 feet of the limits of the airport over there. The airport has basically a glass ceiling, and so that would be the highest you would ever see in that area, and that's what this basically standard says. I'll be very honest with you, probably in my lifetime, nobody could ever afford, in this area, land is very affordable, so the more vertical you get, the more expensive the construction gets, and that's why you don't see very many towered apartments in northern Colorado, and you see a lot of them in Denver. So just the pure aspect of capitalist principles, when you can build 3-story walk-up with surface parking, you can't compete with a high-rise apartment complex. So the zoning that we did, we put it in place to parallel what Loveland did. When we went in the original zoning, this whole property was zoned industrial, allowed 75-foot height. We downzoned the east end to feather it from the neighborhoods, and we reduced the height limits. So we really feel like we're trying to be good neighbors. Growth is growth. I live here too. I'm not a density developer. I've never brought density to you guys. When my career is done in Windsor, my density development will be less than 1 unit per acre, including these properties. So typical land development is 4 units per acre. Fort Collins has a mandate that it grows at 5 units per acre in the city plan. So to put that in perspective, you know, this property would need 2,500 units. So to meet the city plan in Fort Collins is just not what we want in Windsor, and we're not a density developer, but also we're a realist, and that area is an intense area, and it's going to be continue to get intense. And the Centerra project to the south is opening up some more stuff there, and these are not, you know, these are commuters that are looking for a place to live, and they are going to hop on the interstate and go, and that's the market that's out there. But to put a little bit of piece into the height, it's basically the Embassy Suites is the limit. There was a question about traffic. Our project will bring steeplechase through, will alleviate some traffic. It also, this project sets a new stoplight at the entrance to Resurrection Fellowship. Our company's built 7 lanes of roads from I-25 to the fairgrounds and then feathered it in. That was 100% at our cost, and we did that back in the late 2000s. Crossroads is designed to be a major arterial for all regional planning. The MPO has recognized that, CDOT has recognized that, and so Crossroads is one of those big roads that's supposed to be planned. And you know, quite frankly, I used to farm across Crossroads a couple miles to the east, so it wasn't even there. So growth is coming, traffic's here. I ran out to Safeway today at 3 o'clock, and that was a critical mistake hopping on Main Street. Because between the middle school and the high school, it was like 25 minutes to get out to Safeway from the 7th. So, you know, traffic's a big issue, and unfortunately, Colorado turned down two traffic funding questions yesterday, but traffic's a big issue. The rezone that we do, I guess the perspective of, I heard the word blank check. It's a little bit comical, because what I've got in front of you tonight is additional restriction and additional bureaucracy on my property. I'm committing to colors and bricks and pastures of parks and trails and things that I'm not required to commit to if I just leave it under the current zoning. What I'm trying to do is create something to where if I'm not here, someone has to follow. So we're adding pages and pages and pages of restrictions to my zoning that I have right now. And if we back it up 4 more years, I'm adding a lot more pages, because it was just light industrial and there was no requirement. Metal buildings, siding, 75 feet height as far as you can see. So in my position, I'm making a commitment to this community of what we're going to build. Whether I'm here or not, we're making a commitment. We're recording it on this property. So it's, we had done neighborhood meetings, and we didn't, you know, and I appreciate your concern about wanting to see, you know, we did neighborhood meetings. We were sent to the referral agencies. This is Thompson Valley School District. This is not Windsor. We had no objection to it from that school district. So, you know, and they just got some bonds passed yesterday, but growth is growth. So I think that our companies do very high quality growth, and I'm proud of the growth that we've brought to Windsor, and I'm hoping that I answered questions. I can't answer growth questions, because growth is going to come. But I can answer quality, and I can answer commitment. And this, what's in front of you tonight, adds pages and pages and pages of commitments that I'm not required to do. So we're asking for approval on this.
Scott?
Mr. Chair, could I also just add a couple of things that came up during the public hearing? The project that, as Paul pointed out in the land use, or in the presentation, the project is being recommended for approval because it's consistent with the land use map that the town has adopted. It's been part of the comprehensive plan that went through extensive community outreach, and the Fairgrounds Avenue corridor was recognized as a regional commercial, some entertainment, some of the uses that were mentioned tonight, the restaurants, those types of things. Those are all consistent with what the comprehensive plan says. So that's really, I think when the neighbors feel like they're not being heard, I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that the comprehensive plan was adopted with a lot of community input, and the land use map is consistent with what's being proposed tonight. Mr. Lynn just pointed out that it's in the Thompson School District. I just wanted to, regarding the school district comment, the town does have 3 IGAs with the 3 school districts that serve Windsor, and all 3 of them require cash in lieu payments when residential uses are creating student load and additional need for schools. So there is a fee that's paid per dwelling unit that is paid to the school districts. And in general, as Mr. Lynn pointed out, when we send referrals to all of the school districts to show them what type of development is proposed, they can give us comments, and generally they give us positive comments for anything that's commercial or industrial, because that increases their tax revenue and decreases their student load. So generally we get comments that are positive from school districts, especially when with developments, proposing commercial development. I guess Mr. Lind also pointed out that this project, although we weren't going through all of the specific street standards and things like that, but as the property is subdivided and site planned, those streets will be further extended, and there are expansions and things like that of that nature. As was mentioned, Crossroads Boulevard is another thoroughfare that is called out in our comprehensive plan. It's called out in our roadway master plan as a regional arterial that will connect I-25 and Highway 85 with a connection to O Street. So it is a major thoroughfare, and it's planned to be expanded. There are some two-lane sections currently that we expect will eventually be widened to accommodate the traffic. So I guess I just wanted to make those clarifications, but I think most of the other comments were discussed already.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Any additional comments, questions from anybody? Cindy?
Paul, could you put the map that you had, I think it's like page 4 of your staff presentation slides? Because based off the comments I'm hearing, it seems like there's some confusion about the land that this PUD would apply to versus the land that the multifamily rezoning happened, and these are two totally separate. I think it was the next one down from that. So could you maybe just kind of elaborate to clarify that issue regarding
Sure.
the area that the height in the PUD applies to versus what applies to that multifamily area?
Yeah, absolutely. So the MF2, the kind of orange striped color in the middle, is the apartment complex under construction, and it's the public hearing that I think most people are referring to about the height of those buildings previously. So that's not changing, and it is the area that's the red that's within the dashed black line would be subject to the PUD and the potential 130-foot height maximum.
And then from the standards comparison that you wrote, there was a very specific limitation to what types of buildings could be that 130 feet.
Right.
And it's not like every building in there could be that, correct?
Correct. I believe
so it's not a 55 limit for everything else?
Right. Majority would be 55. The 130 would be for, I believe, hotels or office buildings like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, you got a comment, or yeah, could you come up to the podium?
Amber Oxley, 4609 Pompano Drive, Windsor, Colorado. What's the purple?
Purple is the limited industrial zoning.
And that's the 75-foot height there. I think just to clarify that as well.
I believe it's 55, and there may be some additional development agreement specific standards that would apply.
Yeah,
that's
just
a good point, Cindy, as far as where the specific site is that we're talking about here. So just so people understand the definition of that, what we're talking about as far as the site itself. Any other comments, questions from the commission? Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Kim Davey. I live at 8795 Longs Peak Circle in Steeplechase. So I understand the orangish site location is the 57 acres that we're talking about. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Paul indicated that not all buildings could go to that 150-foot height. Is that correct? So does that mean 3 can, or 4 can, or 5, or what?
Paul, you want to address that as far as what the terms are?
The 130-foot would apply for office, residential, and hotels.
And only within the red site location area, not the orange color that you mentioned a minute ago, only the red.
The one that says site location.
Right.
So as many buildings as we could fit in there, whether they are businesses, apartments, hotels, they could all be 150.
Yeah, there are
So if we could fit 5 of those in there, there could be 5 150-foot buildings, or 130 or whatever.
If the chair wants me to, I don't want to
Scott, go
make this a
ahead.
conversation. So, yeah, there are a lot of other requirements in the document that go into that, though, in terms of setbacks and offsets and open space and green space requirements and those kind of things. But yes, as long as the uses that Paul mentioned, then those buildings could be.
Okay. So it's my understanding if it meets that requirement with setbacks and all the other regulations, and you could fit 5 of these miscellaneous buildings in there, they could all be that tall. It's not going to be one hotel and then other businesses and apartments. They could all be equally that tall, correct?
Potentially.
Okay. And then you said the purple is what, Paul? Is that light industrial or?
Correct.
Okay, so will we be coming back in 6 months to rezone that? For more apartments and more hotels and more?
You know, if we could foresee in the future, we'd probably be doing something else.
Lord knows
rather
I
than-
wish I could, because we've been here a lot.
Mr.
So-
Chair, can I also just clarify when we talk about the purple, I just want to clarify the dark purple down on Crossroads Boulevard, that's the existing Highlands Industrial Park where Caterpillar
Right.
and those areas are. And then the lighter lavender purple color it includes several other properties that aren't owned by the applicant. So, but they are zoned in limited industrial, and they do have higher height allowances. But like Paul said, there are other restrictions on those properties as well.
I would encourage you to vote no on this and keep it as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Doug.
Since the height seems to be the issue, and hearing the applicant say that he doesn't foresee anything going to that height in his lifetime, is there, I know PUD is designed to set standards that everybody knows going in, but is there an option to require, I don't know if it's a conditional use grant or some other approval in the future for any buildings that exceed the 55 or whatever the kind of the base height is, and if that makes any sense, so that
Scott, you want to address that?
That's not included in the current proposal. That's something that I guess the Planning Commission could consider and maybe ask the applicant what that would do. Generally speaking, we wouldn't apply a conditional use grant to a new building just because it's a conditional use as opposed to a conditional structure. So I don't believe I'd recommend that avenue. If there's another avenue that you want to entertain with the applicant, I guess that's, but I wouldn't use the conditional use grant.
Okay. Martin, seems like the reoccurring theme is the height issue, so even though we're replicating what you did with Loveland, and you said the Embassy Suites would probably be as high as it would be, is that at 130? Seems to me that's a
I
little
think
bit.
that when you talk about heights, it's the total height of the project, which includes antennas and what have you, and I think that's why the Embassy is where it's at, 9 stories. But again, there is if you can picture an upside down wedding cake, that's the FAA's height restricted area. We're in that the same as the Embassy on this property, so that's why we picked that with Loveland. That was the limit. Obviously, that wedding cake has a flat topography, and the topography on our side alone has over 40 feet of fall. So in certain areas, could be a taller building, but it would be 130 AGL above ground level. But getting back to that, that's why we're here tonight. We've disclosed everything we want to do. put it out on the front and deal with that. And what we're trying to do is keep Windsor in a competitive level with the other side. And so that the market can pick where they want to be. They don't let the zoning or the enticement pick where they want to be. And by example, we had submitted back in the mid-2000s when the economy was really big, a 12-story high apartment, or excuse me, a office complex on the corner of Crossroads. It's called Crossroads Towers. Went to full construction documents, and then the economy killed it. But that would be a very attractive commercial user for Windsor if we could get in a big office user. But if we start restricting more than Loveland did on the site, we're writing ourselves out of that game. So that's why we actually handed the document to staff of what Loveland approved, and we let them come back and call it. And this one already is more restrictive than the Loveland site. So we'd ask tonight that it wouldn't be additionally vetted out, because we've spent almost a year with staff on this project, getting it to tonight.
Okay. Victor?
Martin, just to clarify on the site location, what's the acreage there? 2 acres. Acreage? Yes, acreage.
57?
It's right at 60.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other questions?
One other thing on talking about more vertical buildings. For every square foot of building we build, we have a requirement for a parking space. And so as you go up, you need to go out with parking. And so it's physically, I mean, we can't build a wall. You can't. Unless you're gonna start going underground with parking, which is at about $40,000 a parking space. You can go by thousands of places along I-25 north of 144th to build those kind of buildings at a much cheaper rate than to try to pile a whole bunch of tall buildings on one 60-acre site. So that's just not a reality of what's gonna happen.
Any other comments, questions?
Move to close public hearing.
Second?
And moved by Commissioner Talon, seconded by Commissioner Showerman, that we close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. We'll reconvene our regular meeting, moving along to the next agenda item, which is the recommendation to the town board for a zoning proposal to create a PUD. Any further information that you want to give us, Paul?
Nothing further, no.
Okay. See if he had any further. I guess you don't have any further information that he wants to provide, so. Comments or questions from the commission?
I've got a quick comment. You know, I definitely heard the issue that people have concern over the 130-foot height. But as I'm looking at the map and figuring that area is 2,000 to 3,000 feet away from the nearest residences, and pulling out my old junior high geometry, which is a little rusty, but going up 130 feet versus going over 2,000 to 3,000 feet, that angle that's involved there as far as blocking views is a very slight angle. I mean, it'd be no different than having a building next door to you that's a 2-story home instead of your 1-story home is much more likely to block someone's view than a 130-foot building 2,000 feet away. So while I certainly understand people's concerns, I don't think it's a pragmatic concern in this situation. So I would support the PUD overlay as presented.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Victor?
You know, we've got a lot of concerns about traffic again coming through, and I think that Scott, you explained that fairly well, that it's a major arterial that's going to go through there, but it's time to build it. It doesn't happen overnight. We've got to have projects like this in place to fund it. You know, so again, I agree with everything that's been said, and I agree with the PUD. And with that, I would recommend the Planning Commission forward to the Town Board a recommendation of approval of the planned unit developed, subject to all outstanding planning and staff comments being addressed.
second that.
It's been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Showerman, that we forward a recommendation of approval of the planned unit development subject to all outstanding planning commission and staff comments being addressed by the applicant. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed vote no. And motion carries 4-1. Okay, we will now move up into the next agenda item, which is a public hearing for the rezoning petition. So we'll close our regular meeting, open up the public hearing. And that is for rezoning petition for Eastbrook, no, excuse me. Yes, Eastbrook annexation number 1 and Eastbrook annexation number 2 and 3. Melissa?
Thank you. This is another rezoning request for a portion of Eastbrook annexation number 1 and number 2, and also includes annexation number 3 of Eastbrook. This rezoning request was reviewed in accordance with Article 5 of Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code. This particular property is located northwest of Highway 21 and State Highway 392 on the east side of the town. The zoning and I should say the subject area is actually in the red triangle. It's not the whole area, so just the red triangle area. It's got 3 zonings on the properties. Single family 2, which is like a duplex zone that's on the north edge, that's shown in the yellow. Limited industrial, which is in the middle in that pink lavender color, and then general commercial along the south portion of the property. The request is to rezone the property to RMU, which is residential mixed use, and then also a slight portion of the general commercial or limited industrial area to a general commercial, which would result in the majority of the property to be residential mixed use, which is 56 acres approximately, and then the general commercial area about approximately 9 acres on the east side of the property. Down in the corner is the conversion table if you're curious on what the existing to the proposed is, including the 5 acres that aren't changing zoning, which is located here, if I can get this to work. And this area is not changing zoning here. So we look at the land use map. Currently the land use map, and it's kind of a little hard to see, this is the area here, has 3 land uses on it. The northern area is a floodplain, mineral extraction, and open space park land use. That's largely to do with the large floodplain that's on the area, which has to do with the John Law Ditch. In the middle there, it's an orangish red color. That's residential mixed use. That was changed a little while back to allow for residential in this area. And the southern part is red for general commercial. So this is something that's coming up in the future, but or on this agenda, but a little later. But I just wanted to let you know what that land use map looks like and has similar, currently allows similar uses that are proposed today. There is a little bit of background to this project. I'm not sure if everyone recalls what the conversation, but back in 2016, around this time I believe it was, there was discussions on changing what land uses were to be allowed on this property. Originally, like the zoning says, it's industrial and general commercial, with allowing for residential in the north portion across the Greeley Canal. Due to some circumstances on the site, including that floodplain for the John Law Ditch, which I will bring my cursor along so people can see it. It's a ditch around here. Due to that, and then other aspects such as access onto the property and traffic patterns in that area. After that, the applicant had discussed with the Town Board and Planning Commission at that time, changing it to residential uses with some components of neighborhood commercial allowed. The residential would be a little bit of a variety of different residences types, including some smaller lots, some larger lots, and then also some multifamily. After those conversations, the Town Board and had talked to the Severance Town Board. They had an IGA in the area, what can go on there. Both mutually agreed that that cooperative planning area would be allowed to have residential uses in portions of it, and this is one of the portions that was allowed to have residential. So based on those discussions, the amendment to the Windsor Severance Intergovernmental Agreement to allow such uses, this is the next step, preparing for the rezone to allow for the residential. And then later on, we'll do the land use map amendment to support that. In the future, if this was proposed or this was approved, a major subdivision would be proposed for the property, which would reflect, again, this concept plan that was brought up back in 2016 and brought us along till today. So the comprehensive plan conformance, it does meet some aspects of the comprehensive plan with the residential areas framework and then the growth for commercial industrial frameworks. This one has to do with the diverse housing types in residential neighborhoods, trying to get a variety in family sizes and lifestyles, diversity of housing types and sizes, and then also having that proximity between residential and higher density residential and commercial areas or mixed use or some kind of amenities that support the residential. For the commercial industrial areas framework plan, this has to do with developing new neighbors adjacent to existing neighborhoods and urbanized areas. For this plan, basically it's a continuation of the existing Village East subdivision, which is immediately west of this, across the Great Western Railroad tracks. So it would be an extension into this area. So this is the notification area. The public meeting was held for the rezone on September 27th, following the notification parameters brought forth in the code. And then, of course, for this public hearing and for the town board hearing that is set for later on this month. So staff does recommend the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval of the rezone petition and the ordinance to the town board, subject to all remaining Planning Commission and staff comments be addressed. And like all presentations and hearings, staff requests that the following be entered into the record: the application, the materials, the staff memorandum, the supporting documents, the testimony, and this recommendation. The applicant is here tonight if you have any questions for him and their team, and I am here too as well if you have any additional questions for me.
Does the applicant have any information that he wants to present, or?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Not at this time.
Since this is the public hearing portion of the process, is there anybody in the audience who has comments or questions pertaining to this agenda item?
My name is Mary Scott. My address is 33111 County Road 21, which is on the corner of 392 and County Road 21. We've lived there 36 years. When we moved in there, County Road 21 was a gravel road. I know as far as the development, I know that's going to happen, probably. Also on the other side, which is Severance, is going to happen too. But as you said before, it's the traffic. The traffic is atrocious in the front of my house. It has helped putting turn lanes in on 392 and 21 somewhat, but with the amount of trucks, construction trucks, cement trucks, oil trucks, sand trucks, everything, with the new high school going in. Something's going to have to be done to slow it down, to do something, because I really fear, just because of the speed that people go on that road, a terrible accident's going to happen there because of the traffic. I just ask that you look into that, roundabouts, anything to slow the traffic. I was going up the road by Severance Middle School. The trail goes down there, and children use that trail to cross 21 to get to Village East housing development. The poor kid couldn't even begin to cross the road until I stopped and which I almost got rear-ended by another truck, but it really is a problem all the way up to 74. It really is a problem with all the houses going in there. They're going to make a new road into 21 from this new housing development, which is okay, but there again, I can't even turn into my driveway sometime because people go around me on either side, whether I have my blinker on or not. There is a problem with that area right out there as far as traffic is concerned. So I ask that you consider that.
Thank you, Mary. Any other comments, questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Jack Bezick. I live at 692 Park Edge Circle. My backyard actually overlooks where this development is planned. I already know that there's probably going to be development and all that. It's one of those things. But one of the concerns that I have is that there is an old tree on the property, and I don't know if there's been any consideration for that tree or not. It looks to be like over 100 years old. It's got to be. It's a huge tree. There's bald eagles, golden eagles, falcons, hawks, all kinds of birds and things that live in around there. There's a pair of owls that live there. I was just kind of wondering if there was consideration for that or not in the plans, or if they were just going to be taking that away and putting up a house. That's all I kind of have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions?
My name is David Cheddar. I represent Global Asset Recovery, who is the owner of the property, and I handle their development here in Colorado. The two issues, first on traffic. When we were putting this together, we sat down with staff and we have done a full-blown traffic study already on the property, and that was a big part of the considerations for this layout. And that traffic study was it's only probably 90 days old. So we went through and we really looked long and hard at the traffic situation there and made sure that the layout that we're proposing really addresses the traffic concerns within the area. As far as the tree is concerned, yes, we did take that into consideration, and the tree, the way it lays out right now, would remain in its location.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
Any questions for Mr. Cheddar?
Got a question for staff.
Okay. Guess not. Thanks. Go ahead, Cindy.
So I know in the presentation you mentioned that the intergovernmental agreement had been amended to allow for some residential use, but this seems to be almost exclusively residential use with just that tiny pocket remaining of general commercial. And I guess I have a concern whether that meets the spirit of the IGA amendment, as well as just whether or not that's a good choice to eliminate that substantial amount of general commercial area from the town's purview.
This was the concept plan that was carried forth with when those discussions were made. So this is representative of what was being proposed for the property. I can't speak to all the dialogue that went on. Yes, it is a sizable amount of industrial and some general commercial that would be changing, but I have the not evidence, but the amendment itself saying that it supports this, what is being proposed. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, and if I could just add to what Melissa, actually I think it's probably before you started with the town, that some of the conversations, it did get reviewed by the Economic Development Department, and they determined that given the floodplain property and some of the other site constraints, it wasn't really prime commercial ground, and so that was factored into the land use map amendment at that time.
And then I guess that kind of leads into my other question was, I was looking at the one slide that showed floodplain, and almost that whole area was part of the floodplain. I mean, is this set up to appropriately mitigate that, or are we setting homeowners up to be flooded?
I may ask Mr. Shetter to expand on this, but there is a substantial amount of work that's being done to between both what's going to be done on this property and what the town's done, both off-site and south of here, that will have will create some changes. The extent of the changes to the floodplain, I do not know. I know they are working on a map amendment to it, a revision, CLOMR or LOMR, just to be throw around acronyms, but to see where that is. But I'm not sure if that has been settled yet, an extent.
The flood issue has been addressed. As when you look at this particular property, you've got properties that run along 392 that have not been annexed into the town of Windsor. And so they still fall under the guidelines of Weld County. So when we looked at this particular site and put this particular site together the way it is we mitigated for the 4,400 CFS that is coming across that. So once again, 4,400 CFS is more water than the Poudre River at flood stage. So what we had to do is we had to mitigate it, but in mitigating it, we had to meet what was called a zero rise tolerance, because our neighbors are in Weld County. So we have to meet the standard of Weld County. So our water engineer is Aaron Savar with Northern Engineer, and he's done all the studies, and we've developed the site to make sure that we have a zero rise on our neighbors. So we're having no additional impact on them in mitigating as much of the water on our site before it flows and it continues west along 392 till it gets to the Great West Trail, at which point it starts to sheet, you know, over 392. But we have mitigated it for our site with a zero impact on our neighbors. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Any other questions, comments? Great.
Move to close public hearing.
Mr. Chair. If I may, just on the question on the trees, or the single tree, it sounded like. The landscape code that was presented to Planning Commission recently and is going to second reading at Town Board later this month, it does have a tree preservation section. It would not mandate the preservation of that tree, but it would require mitigation if it were to be taken down, of additional trees to be planted. So we'd certainly encourage the tree to be preserved, and I think staff can look at that with the applicant as well.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor. Second for that? Okay. It's been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Dennison, that would close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is the recommendation of the town board for the rezoning petition for this item that we just discussed. Any further questions or comments from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning Commission forward the recommendation of approval of the rezoning petition and the ordinance to the town board, subject to all changes by the Planning Commission and the staff.
Did you second that? Yes. Okay. Been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Dennison, that we forward a recommendation of approval to the rezone petition and ordinance to the town board, subject to all Planning Commission items being addressed. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed vote no. And motion carries 4-1. We will now close our regular meeting, open up another public hearing for the next agenda item, which is land use map amendment. Alyssa?
So this is a land use map amendment, as you mentioned. It's for the same property that we just went over the rezone for, located northwest of Oak County Road 21 and State Highway 392. Same zoning as before. Again, it's in the red highlighted area rather than the adjacent. The adjacent zoning is RMU to the west, county zoning to the south is agriculture, and then over here Severance has a PDU, which is actually similar uses that is proposed with this rezone that we just heard. So this is the zoning map. The current land use map, I've showed it the rezone presentation. It has a mix of the open space floodplain mineral extraction area, which is the green on the northern part of that area. The center area is the orange. It doesn't show up very well on this screen, but that's the RMU. And then the southern portion is in the red. That is the commercial. So this is trying to show you the existing versus proposed. This is a diagram of how it is laid out right now, the strike bars crossed. And basically the proposal is to do a redistribution of the same land uses in a different configuration to show, to reflect the proposed pattern they'd like to do in the future. Again, that background I was talking about, this land use map amendment would be done if the rezone was approved to clean up the land use map and reflect the allowed uses and on the site. So I won't go back over this. It's just there to remind you of the tie to this. Land use map amendments do have some criteria that we want to consider when we do them. One is conformance with the comprehensive plan. Second is compatibility with existing and planned land uses, minimizing detrimental impacts to existing or planned transportation system, and then also adequacy of existing or planned utilities. So for the comprehensive plan, these are the same land or goals and objectives that we went over with the rezone. It has to do with residential areas and the commercial industrial areas frameworks, and their goals of where to put new growth adjacent to existing neighborhoods, and then also trying to get a more diversified portfolio for housing types and sizes. Compatibility with existing and planned land uses. The land uses in the area are reflective of what's shown here, the residential mixed use north of here, in this area here that would continue into this neighborhood. Commercial all along Highway 392, which has that to do with that commercial highway feel, and then also the agreement with Severance for commercial industrial uses in that area. And then also some certain areas pulled apart for the floodplain. Minimizing detrimental impacts to existing or planned transportation system. This will be an extension of the Village East subdivision from the west to the east. It does go over the County Road 21. As folks have mentioned, it is transportation and traffic together are a big concern in the area, and that it was the major comment at the neighborhood meeting that we had. There was a traffic study that was done for the area to determine the appropriate locations for the access points and whether or not a access point was needed off of 392 through discussions with the staff, engineering department, and the transportation consultants and the applicant. The design with the access up of 21, I'm sorry, was determined to be adequate for what they're proposing here. So with that, with the extension of the road system and the traffic study, the transportation system through the numbers will hold up fine with this. And then for adequacy of the existing or planned public capabilities, that's your sanitary sewer utilities, they are in the immediate area, both in the Great Western Railroad right-of-way and also in the road system that with that Village East subdivision to the west. So this public hearing was notified, similar to the rezone, and There was not a public meeting held for this, but with the public meeting that we had for the rezone, we discussed that this land use map amendment was occurring. So the recommendation here is to recommend have the Planning Commission approve the resolution 2018-03 for the proposed land use map, but on the condition that the town board approves a rezone petition for the property. This land use map amendment does not go to town board, but the rezone goes to town board on the 26th of this month. So if that passes, then we would allow the resolution to go through. If that is denied for some reason or tabled, and if ultimately denied, then the land use map amendment would not go through. So staff does request that the application and materials, the memorandum, the testimony, and the recommendation be entered into record.
Anything else, Melissa?
No.
Okay. Since this is the public hearing portion of the process, does anybody in the audience have any comments, questions pertaining to this agenda item? I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Talon, seconded by Commissioner Foreman, that we close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. Motion carries unanimously. We will now reconvene our regular meeting and move to the next agenda item, which is Resolution 201803 for the land use map amendment. Comments, questions from the Commission?
Mr. Chair, I move that we, the Planning Commission, approve the resolution number 2018-03 as presented with the conditions the town board approve the rezoning position for the property.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Talon, seconded by Commissioner Dennison, that we approve resolution number 2018-03 as presented with the condition that the town board approve the rezone petition for the property. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed, vote no.
Twice.
And motion carries unanimously. Moving to the next agenda item, which is a preliminary site plan, Lakeview multifamily, 610 Cedar Street. Carla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The item before you is a preliminary site plan for multifamily for Lakeview Addition Subdivision for filing, Lot 2. This preliminary site plan for multifamily has been reviewed in accordance with Section 17720 of the Municipal Code, which outlines the process for multifamily developments. This site is located just west of Windsor Lake, east of 7th Street, Highway 257. It's also north of Cedar Street and south of Cedar Court. The property is zoned residential mixed use, and it is just north of the Central Business Zone District. The property once had a single-family residential structure on it, and that was demolished several years ago, and this property continues to be vacant, and the applicant is proposing 6 multifamily units on the property. The site characteristics include, well, the site is 16,000 square feet. There will be one building consisting of roughly 5,500 square feet, and the applicant is anticipating that the 6 units would contain 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. the building height, 23 feet. And the building materials would be consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, lap siding and similar colors, along with some synthetic stone wainscot. This is the preliminary site plan. So the one building would be located here and facing the lake. They have porches and balconies proposed over here with the parking and a circular drive in the back over here. And the main access point is an alley that's shared with a fourplex directly west. This is the landscape plan. Most of the open space facing Cedar Street, as well as some screening adjacent to the parking. These are the proposed building elevations showing the lap siding, stone treatment, and the applicant has also proposed a carport here, which would cover 6 spaces. 4 spaces would remain uncovered. This application is consistent with the comprehensive plan sections regarding growth framework. Also the residential areas framework, providing diverse housing to meet the varying needs of different types of family and sizes. And staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve this preliminary site plan with the condition that Planning Commission and staff comments are addressed with the final site plan application. And staff requests that the following be entered into the record: the application, supplemental materials, staff memorandum, supporting documents, and staff's recommendation. That concludes my presentation, and the applicant is here as well to answer any questions.
Okay. Does the applicant have any additional information he wants to present?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Comments, questions from Commission?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the preliminary site plan subject to all conditions being followed as stated by staff.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Foreman, that we approve the preliminary site plan subject to any conditions being addressed for the final site plan. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed vote no. Motion carries unanimously. Communication from Planning Commission. Cindy.
Nothing.
Foreman.
Nothing.
Mr. Toad.
Just on the second to last item, you know, where we were talking about the commercial stuff, that's been in the works for quite a while. And I remember when we sat in that work session, and we had to do some horse trading, I guess is what the word was from their town manager. What did we have to horse trade away? Or did we just work out an agreement?
Just a pony.
Just a pony.
I think just the boards came to a consensus, so.
Yeah, I just always remembered that we were gonna have to horse trade, because they were really concerned about that commercial area down there. Other than that, no more communication.
Doug? No. Communication from Town Board Liaison. David? Yes, sir. Just glad to be here, right? Yeah. Communication from staff?
Included in your packet is the site plan for Southgate development. And if there are any concerns or questions, we ask if you could forward those or let us know if you have comments as soon as possible. Because it was under a fast track review, we have turned in comments to the applicant already. What is in your packet is the first submittal. We're waiting on a second submittal, but since that time we have met with the applicant and they've addressed the comments that we had on the building elevations.
So if anybody has any comments on that, if they could get them to staff as soon as you can. Good. Anything else, Carlin?
That is it.
Okay. Melissa? Paul? Scott?
No communications other than the November 21st Planning Commission meeting was canceled because of the Thanksgiving holiday, so our next meeting will be the first meeting in December.
Okay. Amanda, anything?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.